Hi guys. I'm just, I guess, following up on where I was with my last video. What I've done is I've built these 5 Wraithguard models. I'll get the other ones. So you can see there's 5 there. And these are the 5 heads. So I know they look grey, but I've actually base coated these in a grey paint because grey is a good neutral colour. And I don't know if I went through this last time. I don't think I did. I'll just show you this. So the bases on these models, I've put some skulls and just some pieces from other parts of the sprue. So it looks, I'm going with that ruins theme. And yeah, it's sort of like some skulls amongst the ruins of this model. A bunch of rocks and sand and stuff like that. And to just talk about what I've done so far. So I base coated the model in grey. I think it's called Mechanicus Standard Grey or Mechanicum Standard Grey from Citadel. And then I went with a layer of Incubi Darkness. And then I put on a dark blue wash called Drakenhof Nightshade over the whole model. So I think I might have done 2 coats of Incubi Darkness, because even though it's a base colour, it's a little bit thin, or at least when I water it down enough so it spreads well. It seemed a bit thin. But then I put the blue wash over the whole model, and that's left it at this stage. Actually, what I did since then was dry brush it with this. I initially, I think with this model actually, initially I was painting the base colour on again, but I found that was taking a long time and it didn't really produce much of an effect because the way I was doing it achieves the same result as if I dry brushed it. So I just dry brushed the whole model. Well, it's almost the same result. And then the next step after that, which is what I'm up to now, I've done on this model, which you probably can't see in this light, but I've done the first lot of edge highlights. You probably can't see it though, but I've done that with this Cyberite green. So that's what I was going to do next on this model. So I'll get started on that one. I'm using my this Raphael. It's I like these brushes. Actually, before I do that, just to just want to tidy this up a bit. So, as I've sort of said before, motivation is a very big thing, and for the last, I don't know, couple of weeks, I haven't really been motivated. You know, life gets in the way, and while I have some nice glass display cabinets for my finished models, the models that I'm working on, they sit on my painting desk, which is also my work desk. And if they sit there a couple of weeks, they'll get little bits of dust and things on them. You know, I like to open my windows and get fresh air, but with fresh air comes dust. So I just use an old soft brush to dust my models every now and then. I think before I got my glass cabinets, I used to keep everything on a bookshelf, a big bookshelf, and they used to gather a lot of dust. I know people like to put their models away in storage cases and things. You know, that's fine. But I like to look at my models. You know, the amount of time and energy that you put into building and painting these things. I think you should appreciate it, even if you don't like your painting. You know, you think that you're not a very good painter or something. At least you put in the effort. Or even, I'll go further and say, if you don't even have your models painted, or even if someone else did it for you, painted them for you, you know, you still paid for these things, and they're they can be quite expensive. Are also a big part of these models is the aesthetic. So, you know, people will buy models because they like the rules for that army or something. But I don't know anyone plays the game and doesn't also at least like the look of some of the models that they've got. And I think that's why a lot of people get into this in the first place. Into this game or this hobby. Is the aesthetic attraction. So if you're going to invest your time and money and effort into collecting these things, you might as well look at them. But, not everyone has room for a bunch of display cabinets or whatever. But, do what you gotta do. I think the old, concern a lot of people had or have, that, having these models sitting around might be embarrassing or something, which, I can say I certainly understand that. Well, I think a lot of that sentiment has changed. The whole thing is, it's cool to be a nerd these days. Back when I started getting into all this, I think that was in the 90s. It was a little bit different, but it was already starting to change. But I think there's still sort of stigma attached to some things, but at the risk of giving life advice, you just got to own these things. So if you like doing something, then, and it's not really sort of a harmful activity or something, then just own it. I've had quite a lot of people over the recent years, in particular, see my display cabinets, and these aren't generally people who are familiar with this hobby, or they have like a cursory history of it. They remember it from when they were younger, or they know someone who has been in the hobby, and very often I'll have people come and look at the models in my display case and be quite sort of impressed about how they look, because they do look cool when these things are all put together and painted up. And sort of browse your cases, your display cases for a while and talk about what they like and whatever. I'm talking about all sorts of people, old, young, men, women. So it's not like confined to sort of us few nerds to have an appreciation of this stuff. And if you go to the effort of painting these things up, and especially if you practice and improve your skills, and then go one further and put these things on display in a sort of organised way, like a cabinet, it very much catches the eye of people. So yeah, I guess long story short is you don't need to be ashamed of the things you enjoy. And you'll be surprised at how well people respond to I guess a positive attitude. So yeah, that's a free life lesson. I don't know if any of you guys have had the same sort of experience with your hobbies and sort of people who aren't particularly familiar with them, taking an interest. But yeah, I've certainly seen a lot of it in my time. But when I never saw it was, at least for me, when I used to keep all my models just locked up in boxes, and packed away somewhere. So I guess ultimately it's really a test for yourself, isn't it? Like, if you like looking at these things that you've put effort into, then you do whatever you like with them. But if you meet someone who doesn't like it or whatever, they don't have to like it, but if they start sort of, if you get a bad impression from their sort of attitude towards it, or towards you, then it's a pretty good test for whether that's someone you really want to be spending your time and energy on. guess if you want a little pointer on how to sort of downplay these things a little bit, need some more danger, giving a bit of potential relationship advice, I'd say if people sort of inquire about these things, about this hobby or whatever, they see your collection and things, I tell people, well, it's a creative outlet. And having a creative outlet's pretty important. There's certainly a lot worse things you could be doing. It gives you an opportunity to sort of be creative, practice some creative skills. I find painting to be quite relaxing. Been a quiet time. So, yeah, if you're meeting new people and concerned about their impression of your, let's say, niche hobby, yeah, I know there's more people joining up or doing this stuff every day, but yeah, let's be realistic. It's still pretty niche compared to like watching sports or whatever it is that everyone else does. Yeah, it's just a way to sort of not scare people off. I'd also recommend, not necessarily that you want to ram this stuff down some people's throats or whatever, but if you're sort of letting someone new into your life, and they're sort of interested in what you do and what you like, depending on sort of how long term you expect to want that person in your life, I wouldn't sort of try to hide that this is something you enjoy doing, or at least not try too hard. It's a lot easier to be yourself than to keep pretending to be someone else. There's less to remember. But, you do you. I find it quite interesting that Henry Cavill or Cavill, the guy who plays Superman in the movies. He's been sort of revealing that he enjoys, this hobby. On his social media or during interviews. So, while I think that's quite positive, very positive for this hobby community in particular, I think in general it's a good thing to sort of have people in the public eye with respected positions. I don't want to go into social commentary about whether actors should or shouldn't be respected. The reality is they are. And for someone in a high profile to sort of out themselves as an enjoyer this hobby, it's good. It's good for us, but also just this sort of the idea that people have fringe hobbies in general, because it adds a degree of rationalisation to it. You get these sort of interviewers and things asking about it because it's sort of like interview clickbait, and once people start talking about it, it's like people start to rationalise that a hobby is whatever you want, and ultimately, at least as far as hobbies that are constructive, so not harmful, and something people can be enthusiastic about. Ultimately, it rationalises to the idea that all hobbies, regardless of how popular, can be called a waste of time if people sort of want to look at them negatively. But there's no, ultimately, there's no fundamental difference between one hobby and another. So, in defence of this grand old hobby of ours, if someone were to say that it's a waste of time or money, the counter argument would be that so is everything else. Not to get too sort of caught up in the philosophical ups and downs of it all, but I guess there's not really a solid existential argument for why you shouldn't do this, or I guess more correctly, why you shouldn't be happy about doing this if you want to. But I could just be rambling. My wife would say it wouldn't be the first time. It's funny that I undercoated and base coated and shaded these models a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't do anything since. And I knew I could see them every day because they're on my work desk, and I sort of noticed them and noticed that I'm not doing anything about painting them. You know, I can sort of feel the procrastination ticking on, and it wasn't until I started highlighting some of these models that I sort of felt the motivation tick up again. And it's not that I particularly enjoy highlighting. It's more that the highlighting, I guess it probably doesn't show up well on the camera, but even just this first colour of highlight, this first colour of highlight just adds a dimension to the model that sort of, it helps me see the vision coming together. You know, like what I want out of the paint job or something. Whereas if it's just sort of base colours and a shade or something, there's sort of this combination of being the idea of what the model's going to look like being in my head and not something I can sort of physically look at yet. It's a combination of that and knowing that there's a long way to go. So, particularly when you're painting multiple models. So it's like being at the bottom of a mountain and you just can't be bothered getting moving. But when I've put the first highlights on, it sort of starts to show me the way up that mountain. So once again, this is all about managing motivation, at least for me. Do you guys have any tricks or things you've noticed about yourself when it comes to motivating? And I guess it's not just about motivation to do your hobby stuff. Motivation for anything, getting a job done, even just like maintaining your life. Sometimes it just feels like a lot of work. Clean the paint off this thing. Paint's starting to cake in the end of the brush. That's better. there's actually a lot of detail on these models. Like some of the other ones, pretty straightforward. When it comes to painting them up. But these guys, particularly I guess the way I'm painting them, with these highlights instead of like using a lot of contrast paint or something. It's not something that you'd want to leave to the last minute if you were planning on bringing these guys to a tournament or something. Yeah, unless you had an awful lot of spare time before the tournament, you'd certainly want to get started early, which is sort of what I'm doing. I'm tossing up whether I bring these guys to an event next year or if I bring something else that I'm slowly working on. I think that's done. So there's another one. Let's see if I can get that. Another one with edge highlights. Might not stand out that much, but I think certainly when the next highlight goes on, it'll be a bit more obvious. So yeah, I think I'll give myself a little break now. See you later.